it's easy to say like, oh, it's hard being a student athlete. It's hard doing this, and this, and there's quantifiable kind of energy tanks. There's
Yep.
physical energy. There's like I call it maybe like studious or like
Yes.
productive energy where you're trying to learn, you're trying to figure something
Yes.
out, you're trying to move on to the next class or pass or ace the test or whatever it is. And then there's
Yes.
emotional, social energy, but all of it needs a time to recover.
Exactly.
All of it needs a reset. I call it filling your tank. Like those tanks run down. You have to have something that can fill your tank. So like for me in college, it was playing guitar
Mm,
and talking to my now wife on the phone
nice.
and playing Halo. Like that was
Yes. Yes. Yes.
that filled the tank. How did your idea of recovery change over time, and like what were some of the things you did in college versus when you were a professional that was kind of like both literal recovery and like, okay, I'm getting refreshed here, I'm filling my tank and I'm ready to go back at it.
Well, before I answer that, let me go back to that previous question because I realized I didn't really answer it with specifics. Because I think that the time management thing is important, and building in recovery into that time management is also important. But I think what I did as a freshman, was not very good at managing my time. I would work super hard in practice. I'd have a bunch of homework at night. I probably didn't focus as much as I should on that. I'd spend time socializing with friends because that as a young person who's just physical and trying to figure things out and trying to make friends, especially if you go somewhere new, I spent a lot more time on that, which I think is a very human thing to do, like that social
Hmm.
connection, and trying to figure out where you fit. And so I would sleep in and I'd miss class and I'd be like, dang, I'm failing myself, and my responsibility. And I try to get better. And so just like think about how you approach things as an athlete. You go to the shot put, or you go to the basketball court or whatever, and you're shooting and you're trying to get better, but you don't make everything. But you do try to get better. And so that's kind of how I approached academics. And ultimately, it was clear like, hey, there's class time, there's practice time, there's work time, and then there's social time. And it may look different on different days where those things hit, but you need to block out something for each one of those. And sometimes I would put more energy and focus into the track and field thing. Sometimes I put more energy and focus in the school thing, and adjust and be dynamic. But understanding what those priorities are for me, and for whoever is kind of going in that situation was important. And I was very similar to you from a recovery time standpoint. The way I recovered was I grew up an only child. I didn't have siblings around, and I grew up in a very small town where we had access to the outdoors all the time. And so I liked being by myself. When things were loud and coaches were talking to you and academics were kind of taking over, and your friends were like, hey, you want to go do this? Sometimes I need to be by myself. And
Hmm.
that's where, instead of things coming in, I just needed things to not be coming in all the time. And that's how I recovered. And then spending time with others, playing video games, just something that was competitive, active, but also passive, and just kind of building relationships. It wasn't so much video games for video game's sake. It was chatting with my roommate while we're doing something,
Yeah.
and that was super helpful for me. And I just kind of built those in at the end of the day. At that time of my life, that's when it worked. As
Hmm.
I got older and got more into a professional track and field situation, things were much more intentional. And our approach was, I think as a young athlete in college, it was like just rest when you can, because you
Yeah.
have basically way more on your plate than you can manage,
Yep.
effectively anyway. But as a professional track and field athlete, it was intentional and focused. And we said rest is also training. It's not just this other thing that we do. It's part of training. It's something that we're going to do with intention. And so even from the physical side, that looked like we're going to have 2 hard weeks and 1 rest week. The rest week, we're still going to do stuff, but the expectation is going to be basically zero. We don't expect you to throw far. It's just going to be drills. It's going to be going out and getting a feel. The times aren't going to matter. It's just do something.
Hmm.
Um, so that helped in kind of building in like this period and this period. And then we would build in rest, during a weekly cycles. We'd take a certain day off.
Yeah.
And we'd also be intentional, like, how does your body actually feel today? Remember, rest is can be a step forward. It's not necessarily a step back. coach, it's just not in the cards. For some reason, this warm up lap like completely taxed me.
Yeah.
Let's make an adjustment. And so it was built in, and then it was something we very specifically thought about as a benefit